brings security analyst Robert Siciliano of Hotspot Shield.
Robert Siciliano is joining me now from Atlanta.
Robert Siciliano, identity theft expert.
McAfee online security expert Robert Siciliano joins us now.
Cybersecurity expert Robert Siciliano.
Good evening and welcome to this week's Sunday Night Live. I'm very excited today because today we're going to talk about cybersecurity and security in general. And I'm honored to have my friend Robert Siciliano, who is a security expert. He's the guy all the TV stations call when they need information about, basically explaining the security issues in layman's terms to the viewers. So make it in understandable terms. So some of you know him, some of you don't. Robert, welcome to the show. I'd like you to tell the guests a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of jump right in.
Thank you so much, Paul. Really happy to be here. Very exciting. So I have a security awareness training firm. We provide e-learning, online learning. We do live, or we used to do live presentations, and eventually we will. I actually still have a few live gigs for the fall, believe it or not. I get in front of audiences and inform them of what to look out for. What to be aware of, what links are okay to click and what's not okay to click, how to protect their identities and the information that they are responsible for. We provide phishing simulation training and a number of other products and services to support small, medium, and large businesses to make sure that the bad guys, when they choose them as victims, that they are able to thwart the bad guy and maintain a security posture. So we've been, I've been in business since the early 90s, and I've watched the evolution of cybercrime ever since I was hacked in the mid 90s. As soon as I got merchant status, the ability to accept Visa, MasterCard, and American Express in 1995, within a week, I had lost several thousands of dollars due to credit card fraud, and learned firsthand how the online world, the digital web, puts small businesses like mine at the time at risk. And from that point on, my business initially was about personal security, protecting the person from violence and theft. And I wanted to understand how that worked in the virtual world, online. And so I began to focus on that. And so my focus and my business has evolved with that. By 2001, right after 9/11 hit, that is when my business really took off. That tragic event, brought people's focus to security as it relates to the person and, again, the small business. And ever since that time, I've seen from data breaches where it would make national news when 100,000 records was compromised at a small university in Southern California. Now you have, Equifax with 150, million records compromised. And just very recently, studies coming out showing that between January 1 and June 30, 2020, there's been 27 billion records exposed. Wow. In the past 6 months. So, it's happening at this point at a rate where it's completely out of control. Bad guys are winning in many respects. But there's going to be a day when it's going to affect the grid. It's going to affect, the financial systems. Our critical infrastructures are at risk. And you have, our government and many others in that space making sure that doesn't happen, or hope preventing that, but that doesn't mean it's never going to happen. So right. It's a really big deal. And it's not okay that you as an individual, us as individuals, as consumers, as citizens, don't understand this stuff. When you say, like, my 14-year-old knows more than I do, that's not okay. Like, we all need to take responsibility, not only for the data in which we are entrusted with as small businesses, but for our own individual identities and in our own individual devices. And it's important that we are all up to speed on all of this, because as an employee, you click that link, you download that file that has an executable that launches on the network, you could be responsible for that entire network going down. And that's a really big deal. And that could bankrupt an organization. So look, don't get me started here, Paul.
Well, that's the idea, Robert. We're going to get you started. I just want to say hello to a couple of folks. We got Telly Williams says hello all. We got Kenneth Dunner from Sugarland, Texas. He remembers you from the last time. We got Joe Brawler says hello everyone, and Ron Usher says hi Paul and Robert. So today we're going to talk security and cybersecurity, not just about business, but also about us as people. You know, what we're exposed to, what our risks are, what the business's risks are as far as normal businesses, or in this particular instance, dealerships. Greg Dudley says, hey guys. Hey Greg, thanks for being on, man. So there's lots of areas to this. We certainly don't have enough time to cover every single nook and cranny, but the goal is to have more of an awareness by the time this hour is over, so that there are some things that will now look obvious that before maybe we didn't notice before. Because a dealership is basically like a large ATM machine for a hacker today. And, you know, it's not just making the crank phone calls like years ago. It's gotten so involved and so high tech that you can't always believe what you see with your own eyes, because it may not necessarily be there. So the first thing I guess we should talk about, because this is something that so many people fall victim to, and that would be the phishing attack. Now, for those of you that are sportsmen, we're not talking about going on a boat and dropping a line. The phishing attack we're talking about is the very safe looking email that will compromise your entire system. Now, some larger companies are smart in this area, and what they do is they hire guys like Robert to come in, do an assessment, and then actually simulate phishing attacks and test their employees to let the owner know, or the business know, whether or not they would have been taken down because of actions taken by one of their employees. So Robert, talk to us a little bit about the phishing, how something like that gets started.
So phishing has been around since the early 2000s. And in the early 2000s, actually the late 90s, I started to receive emails from PayPal, from AOL, from Bank of America, and they would ask for your ATM PIN number, your username and passcode. They were pretty blatant about what they were looking for. Many of them had what we call scammer grammar. You know, they were fraudsters overseas that would try to translate what they thought the English language was, and it would come out as broken English. And it was very obvious, you know, and back then, email didn't filter out a lot of the IP addresses, and you'd get everything. You just get everything to your inbox. You know, nothing went to the spam folder, and files would come right into your inbox. You know, executables designed as a PDF or an Excel file and so forth. And now a lot of that stuff is filtered out. Like, you don't get a lot of that today, but you still do in many respects. A lot of it does go to spam. Some of it still does come to your inbox. And the grammar is really clean. And now, you know, you hear when you're talking hackers, you cannot have a conversation today talking about hackers and somebody not say they are so much more sophisticated. And that is true. And what that really means is that this is a profession. This is a for-profit business for them. You know, yeah. the proverbial, you know, hacker working in his mom's basement, that's still happening. But the organized crime syndicates have taken over. It's looking like certain studies are saying that organized crime and cybercrime might be the third largest economy by 2023. Wow. That's a pretty big deal. And so when phishing emails go out, they're targeted. We generally call this spear phishing. If it's going to a specific individual, they'll target that person. They'll focus on that one individual. They might be a CIO, a CEO. They could be marketing, you know, a CMO. They could be PR. They could be accounting or HR. And they're looking for that person on LinkedIn. They're looking for that person on the company website. They get their email address. They get their personal address. They get their phone number, their mobile phone number, and they target that person in a number of different ways. We also call this an advanced persistent threat. Like you have a group of hackers or a single hacker singularly focusing on this one or two individuals for an extended period of time, learning as much about their target as possible. And once they engage them via phone, via email, then they learn that much more about them and get just that much more information so they can follow up with more detailed data to ultimately get that person to either click a link, download a file, or wire money to an account. Okay. So let me give you an example. Like recently I was on the Dr. Oz show. And what we did was we got permission from Dr. Oz's staff, from his IT people, essentially to phish his staff. And so what we did was we knew that the Emmys were coming up. And, these were all media people. They love winning awards, of course, right? Oscars, Emmys, Academy Awards, like that's what they do. That's their world, right? And so what we did was we went to the Emmys website and we grabbed a few logos and some copy and some information. We basically modeled the website in an email. Okay, so we took information in the Emmys that was personal or business like for these individuals, for these employees of the Dr. Oz show. And we basically sent them an email, everybody, that looked like an invitation with discounted tickets, with benefits and bonuses and this and that to basically lure them in, phishing lure them in to get them to click links and to enter sensitive information. And many of them did. Many of them also reported the email to their IT people because they were suspect, which is really good. But a few of them actually clicked the links and a few of them actually entered sensitive information, which all you need is a few. So if we send out an email to 100 people and one of them responds with the social security number, or one of them responds with a username and a passcode, or one of them responds with credit card information, we win. The bad guys, good guys in this case win, bad guys win. So it doesn't take, 99 people to click the link. It just takes one. And so,
well, hold on a second. To that point, a couple of things here. Greg chimed in. He says, stop using Google Chrome. And he also says Google and Facebook track everything we do, which is true. And don't they sell that data? They say they don't, but haven't there been instances where data has been sold?
So I am using a browser today called Brave. So Brave it has a very similar look and feel to Chrome, and you could still use the Chrome apps or extensions along with it. It does less tracking. And then there's also DuckDuckGo. And while websites and browsers and your ISP spend a lot of time tracking you and gathering intelligence and information about you to use to sell and market to you, that, frankly, while important to be aware of, is the least of your problems. So it's good to jump away from Chrome and go to a browser like Brave or DuckDuckGo. But what we're speaking to right now in regards to phishing and the nature of it and how it ultimately affects you and what you need to be aware of and ultimately what you need to be looking for every single time the phone rings and an email comes in is a pretty big deal. Let me give you another example, okay, Paul? So Barbara Corcoran, do you know who she is?
No.
Shark Tank. The real estate mogul on Shark Tank?
No, I don't watch TV.
All right, no problem. I'm sure many of your viewers know who Barbara, or at least if they watch Shark Tank, they know who that is. So she's a very wealthy real estate mogul, and her staff, somebody in her staff received an email that looked like it was coming from the bookkeeper.
Yeah.
And in the process said, there is a property that we have to make a payment on, and there's contractors looking for payment and this and that. And somebody within the organization receiving this email figured it was legit due to the fact that Barbara Corcoran is a real estate mogul, and transactions like this are not unusual at all. And wiring $400,000 is a very common thing for her organization. And so, long story short, during all these communications with the bad guy, the bookkeeper wired, I think, $380,000 out of the bank account to bad guys.
Wow.
So this was a targeted phishing campaign. And so the bad guys simply focused on the bookkeeper, Barbara Corcoran's administrator. They communicated with the two employees via email. They knew what their email addresses were. They ultimately created an email address that looked like one of them. So say it was Jane at barbaracorcoran.com. They might have been Jane S at barbaracorcorans.org, right?
Who checks that, right?
Exactly. So they slightly modified the email address of one employee, and they already had, the existing employees like email template, like her signature and logos and all that stuff, because the bad guys were communicating with her.
Right.
So they gathered enough intelligence so they already had like the template of the employee's email to send to another employee. Make sense?
Yeah.
And that is happening to every single industry right now as we speak. So manufacturing, construction, automotive, right? You name it. Finance. Finance was a big one in the early 2000s, 2004, 5, and 6. Huge, right? But then, FINRA and others, they clamped down and they made it a lot tighter within the financial industries. All other industries are much bigger targets because they're not engaged in the type of encrypted communications that they should be, that are required by the finance industry. Like, you can't move money via your financial advisor by sending an email today. Like, there are so many checks and balances before you move money with your financial advisor. But when it comes to, say, automotive industry or construction or manufacturing, it's not as strict. It's not as tight. There's so much more freedom and flexibility. You can use a Gmail address. You can use an AOL address. You can use basic, at automotive company. Yeah.
They use personal addresses.
Yeah.
I see it every day.
Every day. And so what that means is that the entire industry, or so many other industries, are just the big target today. And it does not take much. You have to keep in mind that these hackers, these scammers, these phishers, they're often in third world countries, right, or parts of the world that would not be considered, a rich nation. And so somebody might make, dollars a day working hourly, right? They will spend all year long on one company or one industry, and with the same scam, the same scheme, the same process, over and over and over and over again, emailing and responding all day long
until they crack.
And all they have to be is successful once.
Yeah.
And they'll make more money in that one hack or that one phish than many Americans might make in 5 years, or people in their part of the world might make in a lifetime. So it's a very profitable way to make a living if you're a bad guy, even here in the US if you're a hacker. So your audience, everybody paying attention, you need to be a little freaked out. You should be unnerved. You should.
To that point, Russ Mann says, "Oh my gosh, I'm leaving the internet now." Ugh.
Often people say to me, I'm just going to start using cash. I'm not going to use my credit cards any longer. None of that matters. I'm going to go offline. The only way that you will not be susceptible to this is if you literally are completely disconnected and all you do is have cash, and your credit is completely frozen, which I can talk about whenever you need.
Yeah.
You have to be completely off the grid in order to not be a potential victim. As a matter of fact, you can be dead for 6 months and still be vulnerable. So we are all susceptible in so many different ways. And it's just so important to engage in all levels of security awareness training so that you understand the big picture and you know what to look for going forward. I am invested in this process all day, every day. And there is not a single day that goes by that I go, wow, that is brilliant what that schemer, scammer, hacker did. It's brilliant. And so the level of sophistication is such that you have brilliant minds collaborating in such a way that they're just so much better at it now. And they're so
here's the thing. Now, it used to be you'd have to 100% click on a particular link in the email. But it's my understanding that it could be as simple as opening the email without necessarily clicking on a link. Is that correct?
So opening an email used to be a significant vulnerability, because once you open that email, photos might launch, certain code might launch, and that code of those photos or something might inject into your device or onto your browser in such a way that would compromise your machine. That being said, I feel that you could safely open an email and not worry. The problem is when you open that email and you begin to click links and you begin to download stuff and you begin to visit certain websites. And what happens is you become socially engineered. So social engineering is the modern day con. It's the art of manipulation. It's convincing the victim, that this is a legitimate communication and that everything that you do in response to this communication is to your benefit in some way, shape, or form. That's the problem, is that the psychology behind what's the information, the communications is so good. It's so perfect. There's no scammer grammar, and it's based on information that we're looking for, information that we're comfortable with. Like if you're an equestrian, if the bad guys will learn that via your Facebook page, they're going to find out about that via your LinkedIn page.
My wife's watching Equestrian, honey. That's an inside joke.
So
I get an email.
I see your polo shirt. I'm thinking equestrian, right? So
I get an email. Hold on a second. I get an email from somebody I know, quote unquote, or even a text or a messenger. I don't open it. I call them. Hey, did you send me something? And you know what? A percentage of the time, particularly in Messenger, no, I didn't send it. I've made them aware that somebody got into their Messenger and sent something out, which probably has malicious code on it.
Yeah. You know, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't get an email or a text message or a phone call that is meant to siphon money out of my bank account every single day of the week. You know, I'm out there. I have several email addresses, several phone numbers. I'm accessible in so many different ways. I'm a target. I've had criminal hackers email me my social security number just to flex their muscles, you know? So it's just so important that going forward that everyone make a concerted effort. I mean, just being on this show tonight, just paying attention, being here, watching the replay, sharing this with friends and family and colleagues is so important. Like, we are all in this together. It is only going to get worse. When I said at the beginning of the show that 27 billion records were compromised between January and June, think about the enormity of that.
Huge.
In 2013, there was 1 billion records compromised. By 2017, there was like 8 billion records. 2019, there was 12 billion records, 15 billion. Now it's 27. You have to recognize that your name, your address, your phone number, your bank account number, your credit card numbers, most of your passwords, right? Phone numbers, email addresses, all that information is likely in the hands of criminals. So when I say that, I'm not saying that to put fear in you or to make you afraid or, make you feel helpless. I'm saying that because that's the reality of it. Yeah. And you need to know what to do going forward to basically make that data useless to the thief. And we can talk about that. But also, what's really important to recognize is that with all of that information, and this is really important, Paul, if the bad guy already has all of that information, in addition to opening up new accounts and taking over existing accounts, they can use that data to scheme and scam you to convince you that they are the FBI, the IRS, the Social Security Administration, your employer, a utility. They can use that data to convince you that they are a entity so they can get more information from you, or they can get you to wire funds out of a bank account to another entity that you may already do business with. what was it, Mattel, not too long ago, an employee had wired like, what was it, like millions and millions of dollars out of the account, like $3 million out of the account to pay bills to a company that was fake, like a fake company set up by scammers. Shell company. And they basically found out who was responsible for paying bills by just connecting with Mattel employees via LinkedIn. You know, they just go to LinkedIn, they find out who's in finance in LinkedIn and connect with all those people. So right now I could pose as an employee of Mattel and I can create a profile on LinkedIn saying that I'm an employee of Mattel. And what's the first thing that LinkedIn's going to do as soon as I create a profile saying that I am an employee of Mattel? What's LinkedIn going to do next? It's going to suggest connecting with people at Mattel. Thousands of them, tens of thousands of them. And I just start connecting. And what happens next? All those Mattel employees connect with me. And then LinkedIn suggests even more. And it just snowballs, right? So that's what's happening today. And when you see the big picture and you recognize what's happening, you understand how the bad guy operates, you are much less likely to be bamboozled, to be scammed. You know, I say all the time that, you know, P.T. Barnum once said that there is a sucker born every minute. And there's no question about that. But I'm going to take it a step forward. I think that every single one of us has a sucker in us. If you for 1 second think that I can't be suckered, you're a sucker, because everybody can be suckered. Look, if you've ever been cheated on by someone, you know, like you've been dating someone and they betrayed you and they cheated on you, you've been suckered. Like that person lied to you, you know. If you've ever been defrauded or stolen from in some way, you've been suckered, right? You put your trust in someone or something and everybody's capable of being suckered. And that's where our vulnerabilities are. Like trust is overrated. We are an interdependent species. We rely on each other. We require trust in order to function in an interdependent culture, society, species. If we did not trust, we wouldn't be able to function. You know, you require trust just to get in your car every day. Right. You wouldn't be able to get behind the wheel of a car if you didn't trust, because you have to trust that the other people on the road don't want to engage in a head-on collision, you know, because the only thing separating you from that happening is a double yellow painted line on the blacktop. Yeah. You just have to trust that everybody coming at you wants to live today and that they don't want to hurt anybody. So we have to trust. And because of that, we automatically trust when the phone rings and when an email comes in. Like I said, Paul, don't get me started.
All right, we got a couple comments here. Ed Roberts says hello. He was having trouble getting on before, but I sent him a screenshot that we're in, so he's in. Welcome, Ed. Russ says, so Russ had said he's leaving the internet now. Joe Brawler laughed at Russ. Greg says, I use Firefox and run tracking blockers.
Yep. Those are all good things to, tighten up your privacy a little bit. Another thing you want to engage in, when it comes to identity theft, right? So a big thing, identity theft is when bad guys either take over existing accounts. So an existing account could be a bank account, it could be a credit card account, it could be anything that has a username and a passcode, right? There's a number of different types of account takeover. And then there's what's called new account fraud. New account fraud is when they open up a new account under your name. And generally that happens, of course, using your social security number. Sure. So the same way that you have applied for loans and credit cards, and when you lease a car, and when you buy a car, when you buy a house, or when you rent an apartment, and when you get a cell phone account, it's required that you give up your social security number, at least temporarily, so that they can approve you via your credit report, right? See if you're a good risk, right? Yeah. So new account fraud is the most purest form of identity theft. And the only way, or the few ways to prevent new account fraud from happening is get identity theft protection, right? Identity theft protection.
Everybody, by the way, everybody watching this, that's what you need to do. If you don't have it now, after this show, make that the first order of business.
Yeah, identity theft protection is excellent. My firm provides identity theft protection. We've been doing this for decades, right? Without identity theft protection, you are a sitting duck, meaning that when there are inquiries made to your credit, you have no idea that this is happening. It's happening in the abyss. You're unaware that it's happening behind your back. You need to monitor, you need to be alerted, and it needs to be stopped if you didn't authorize that transaction. And then if bad things do happen, you need restoration agents, professionals, those that deal with identity theft every day, and they can fix problems when it occurs, whether it's medical identity theft, tax-related identity theft, criminal-related identity theft, account takeover-related identity theft. And identity theft protection services generally don't protect you from any of that stuff. But the restoration agents, their role, their skill, their expertise is to fix those things if and when they do happen. In addition to identity theft protection, you have to get what's called a credit freeze. Now, those in the automotive industry that are dealing with people who are getting credit checks every day should be familiar with the credit freeze.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that at the dealerships. Yeah.
Yeah. So credit freeze is a pretty big deal. And those who run people's credit will tell you credit freezes are a pain in the ass. Meaning that if you are running,
authorize.
What it does is it freezes the person's credit. It locks the lender or the dealership out. They can't see the person's credit. So generally, from my experience, is that when you're going to buy a car or lease a car, usually from my experience, at least in the past 5 to 7 years, the dealership will tell me ahead of time to go and run my credit ahead of time online, even before I go to the dealership. And that way, if I have my freeze, I am responsible for unfreezing my credit before I run my own credit. And they'll tell me where to go. They'll send me links on where to go to run the credit, and it'll automatically, they'll get an email right afterwards. So usually like it's one or two of the 3 credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, Equifax. So I generally have to unfreeze my credit before I go to apply for a lease. And they'll tell me right off the bat, we use Experian, we use TransUnion. And so they'll send me links to both, and I'll unfreeze my credit, and I'll go file a credit report with each of those bureaus, and they get an email, and it's easy. It's much more streamlined. But it can be difficult if the buyer walks into the dealership and you're sitting right down with them and they haven't previously unfrozen their credit and they don't know how to. Yeah, it could be a nightmare. But for you as an individual, as a consumer, a credit freeze is a really good and important way to protect your own identity, so that if a bad guy does get your social and they walk into a dealership, they can't use your social to buy a car under your name and then ship it overseas. So
yeah, that's huge.
Huge. It's a huge. It's a great way to make a living if you're a bad guy. Just stick it in a shipping container and send it to Saudi Arabia. So, right? So it's really important that everybody watching, everybody attending, freeze your credit. And the way you go about that is pretty simple, actually. So we all know how to use Google. So go to Google, not right this second, but go to Google and search credit freeze Experian, credit freeze Equifax, credit freeze TransUnion. So 3 different searches. And each time you do that, you're going to come to the page for each of the credit bureaus where you go and begin the process of freezing your credit. And once you begin that process, they're going to ask for name, address, phone number, social security number. Give it to them. They have it anyways. They're going to want your mobile phone number. And then once you go through this process, you're basically setting up an account at each of the credit bureaus in this process.
Yeah.
And now, once you freeze your credit, they're going to provide you a username, a passcode, usually a secret code. And when you want to unfreeze your credit, you basically log into your dashboard via the credit bureau, and you have complete control. It's awesome. It's how it should be. Credit should be frozen across the board. Everybody's credit should be frozen automatically. But it's not like that. Credit freezes are a choice. I don't think it should be a choice. I think that everybody should have the credit frozen.
It should be a necessity.
I think it should be a requirement. And the reason why it's not frozen across the board is because the automotive industry, the construction industry, the mortgage industry, the manufacturing industry, the finance industry, they all lobbied against credit freezes being frozen across the board. This is probably back in 2007 and 8. So they made it very difficult for Congress to legislate freezes across the board. And so it became an elective process, which is fine. It's a free country, right? That said, here we are. And, anywhere between 10 and 15 million people's identities are stolen every single year because we still rely on the Social Security number as a ubiquitous way of identifying people and applying for credit. So if you get nothing out of this entire presentation tonight, you need to freeze your credit.
All right, we got a few comments. I don't want to fall too far behind here. Paulette says it's interesting that it would happen to Corcoran. Greg Dudley says, I get new car leads weekly from unassigned voice over IP phone numbers. And Ron Usher says, that's it. I'm not talking to anyone anymore. Bye, Paul. And Greg Dudley says, Orwell had the wrong year. I don't think it should have been 1984. I think it should have been 2020.
It actually started in 2004. So in 2004 is when it really became a problem. Hackers went from seeking fame to seeking fortune. That's when it all shifted. Hackers realized that all these connected companies and connected government agencies, that their data was open and exposed. And so they started burrowing into all of their databases, and they stopped hacking for fun and fame and hacked for financial gain. And that has not stopped. So here we are. So credit freezes. And the other big one is password management. So this is huge. Okay. So, backing up just a little bit, like, automotive dealerships and major corporations, they have their IT people in place. They have, managed security service providers. They have chief information officers. They have chief information security officers. They have CFOs. So the dealership, the big companies, they generally have robust security in place to prevent the bad guy from getting in. But that does not mean that they are foolproof. The vulnerabilities are not necessarily in the information security structure, in the IT structure. It's generally in the people on the inside that can be socially engineered. So when we started to talk about phishing emails, think of if you've ever watched movies that revolved around like a Trojan horse, like Brad Pitt, and when they actually built the Trojan horse and they rolled it in to the kingdom, and they all slept in it, and at nighttime they came out while everybody was sleeping, and then they just slaughtered everybody. I mean, that is what a Trojan horse is. And what a phishing email is when you go to the inside of the corporation via an email, right? And so now you're inside the corporate firewall, and that's when people download information, provide usernames and passwords. They open up files that they shouldn't, they compromise the network. That's what a Trojan horse does, okay? So, and the way you prevent that, again, is with IT, with security software and hardware, but also to prevent human hacking. That's where the phishing simulation training comes in. That's where the awareness training comes in, and so forth. So password management is another big one.
What's a good password manager? Are there several?
So password managers, right? That's a great question, Paul. Password managers themselves are software programs to manage all your passwords. And the first thing people say is, well, what if that thing gets hacked, right? I am not so much worried about the password manager software getting hacked, or even the company themselves in the cloud getting hacked, because these are security companies with, bank level military grade encryption, right? They are security companies. Their job and their goal and their role is to be secure and provide security services. Them getting hacked is less likely. You getting hacked because you use the same password across multiple accounts is really the biggest problem. So when I said a couple of times so far that there are in the past 6 months, 27 billion records were stolen. Billions of those records are passwords. So bad guys can parse through this data. They can see a Gmail address and they can see the associated password with it. And they can take that same Gmail address, know that will get the bad guy into the Gmail. They also know that once they're in the Gmail, they can search out that you're a Bank of America client, that you're an American Express client, that you're a CarMax client or whatever.
Automatically with software.
Yeah. And they could go through and they can basically take the top 100 websites out there and they can plug in your Gmail address and its associated passcode that you use for multiple accounts, and they can automatically plug those credentials in. They call it credential stuffing. And they can plug those credentials into all these various sites and they get in. And people wonder, wow, it's magical. These hackers are so brilliant. No, not really.
It's magical.
It's just we're stupid and we're using the same passwords across 50 accounts because we don't want to be burdened with having a different password across every account. And and I have this discussion with my dad, who's 72 years old, and he's like, I just can't. I can't deal. It's just too overwhelming. And I get that, and I understand that it can be burdensome. But think of it like this, right? Mobile phones, right? You got a mobile phone, Paul? Of course you have a mobile phone. I've had my mobile phone since Cellular One in the mid-90s, right? I don't know my mother's phone number. I talk to my mother all the time. I don't know my father's phone number. I don't know my brother's phone number.
Speed dial.
Yeah. If I want to find my mother's phone number, I go to the favorites menu and I see mom and I click on that. So as far as my mother's phone number, it's MOM as far as I know, right? I couldn't tell you what it is. I honestly have no idea. That being said, I don't need to remember my phone numbers because my mobile phone does it for me. That's what a password manager does for you. The password manager remembers all your passwords for you. So once you download and install a password manager, there's a bunch out there. There's Dashlane, LastPass.
That's a neat comment that he uses Dashlane.
Yeah, they're all good. They're all fine. It's a matter of, do you like it? Does it work for you? And they all have like relatively same features and benefits. They're all relatively, priced the same. They all work pretty much across all devices and browsers and so forth, operating systems. That being said, once you download and install it, you like it, run it, pay for it, because you can only use the free versions up to like 10 passcodes or 10 sites.
Yeah.
Then, you train the password manager to remember all the different websites that you visit on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. And over time, your password manager becomes so important to you. It becomes such a fundamental part of the way you compute every day that you can't imagine how you lived for so long without it. And there are enterprise level password managers available as well. And as you train the password manager to remember your passwords, you begin to update all the different websites that you go to on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis with a new and updated and stronger password. So if you're using the same passcode across multiple accounts, you begin to train the password manager and change up all the passwords. And the password manager itself will suggest and provide you with passcodes.
Random alphanumeric.
Alphanumeric, uppercase, lowercase characters, 12, 14 characters that you will never remember, but you don't need to remember. Your password manager remembers it for you. So,
got a couple comments need to get to. Paulette says, Robert, you are as impactful today as you were in 1999 when we met. As someone who processes credit cards daily, this awareness is awesome.
Yes.
Robert Sebastian says, scammers tried to collect an electrical bill they claimed was late from our business. The same phone number was flagged in Google for several scams.
That's a big one. Paul, that's a big one right there. And the fact that somebody searched the phone number to determine if that phone number was part of another scam is really important. That's an aware employee that should be lauded for that. That being said,
buddy Robert,
if that phone number didn't show up, that being said, if that phone number didn't show up in search, that could also be problematic because there may not have been evidence of the scam happening. So you get lazy scammers in that situation. Yeah. So another response would be to directly call the utility, right?
Yeah. I'm a big one for calling to verify. If I don't trust it, I get on the phone and I call. And
verify or die. I'm telling you, always verify. You going forward as a business, I honestly believe you should never pay a bill. Going forward, you should never pay a bill unless you verify its authenticity. Ever. Like ever pay a bill, whether it's electronically, via paper, via telephone, any incoming request for finances, you should never, ever, ever pay a bill unless you authenticate the legitimacy of that transaction. And that generally means, like most of the time, logging into your account, right? Logging into your account, or if you don't have an account for whatever reason, calling the entity that you already know that you do business with, in so many different ways, confirming that transaction, however you might do that. Email is lazy. That's not the best way to go about it. Right. Going to websites and getting the actual legitimate phone number from that company and calling. You have to exhaustively make sure that this bill actually should be paid. I can't tell you how many. It's happening in the marine industry, in the automotive industry, where you rely on electricity for your devices to be running all day, for you to function, for you to conduct transactions, for you to sell cars and boats and so forth. It's a big deal, and it's expensive. When that happens, it could be tens of thousands of dollars lost.
Yeah, we got Greg says new car leads from out of state asking if you ship. Well, Greg, here's the funny thing. 20 years ago, I was selling cars on eBay. I was shipping cars across the country. I was shipping cars overseas. And here's the beauty, okay? Here's something that they did back then, and I'm sure it's more sophisticated now. So I would make the deal. They would wire the funds. I'd give them wire transfer information. But here's how they got slick. They would send bogus wire transfer confirmation emails from PayPal and from other services, wanting me to click in that email, which I never did. I always went in my own back end to PayPal to verify whether or not funds were received. And oftentimes over the internet, that was 20 years ago. So now I'm sure it's even worse. The email would come in that the wire transfer occurred, click here to verify, no way. I'd go in the back end, I find there was no such wire transfer at all. So at which point I knew the jig was up.
There are so many ways to be defrauded via wire transfers these days. You ship the car out, your out-of-pocket expense, and eventually that money expires. There are so many, fraudulent buyers today. That is a big deal that the automotive industry as a whole really needs to pay much closer attention to and find out and figure out a solid solution for that. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, a form of car theft that leaves the dealer hanging with monies lost in the tens of thousands of dollars on a daily basis throughout the entire industry, throughout the entire world. And you have to really pay close attention to every single aspect of those transactions before you let a car off the lot when you're wiring funds or funds are being wired. It's a big deal.
Now, all right, so Russ says, okay, so things for us to do now, lock credit, password manager. Are there any other steps beyond, verifying any obvious things that jump out?
Yeah, so, employees, bringing employees into your organization. We're in a really crazy time, as who doesn't call today a crazy time? But, as you're hiring, background checks, bringing the enemy into your organization can sometimes be the worst thing. When you have an employee that has access to sensitive information, has access to other employee profiles, has access to network systems, that could be a big issue. So don't just hire anybody, and especially do background checks and monitor their behavior internally. Anybody that has access to any sensitive information within a dealership, there should be systems in place to monitor keystrokes, to monitor websites visited. You should know who's accessing what information and why. Basically, it's Big Brother 1984, where it's the dealership itself is watching the employee's behavior online. While some of you may not like to hear that or think that's an invasion, I think that's really important. As a business owner, You want to know what your employees are doing on company-owned devices on a daily basis. Because if they are doing anything nefarious, you need to know about that. In addition, social media, there needs to be policies in place during the hiring process. There needs to be training in place during the hiring process on what's okay and what's not okay to post online. This is a big one. So this goes a little bit beyond security into the realm of online reputation management. So I spent a lot of time talking about this because as a dealership, you have, say, 30, 40, 50 employees. What your employees say and do and post online matters. And it matters in a big way. Because if they're posting stuff that's racist or homophobic, just inappropriate in some way, shape, or form, that is going to directly reflect upon you as an organization, your brand. And it can negatively impact every aspect of your business. Because if you have employees that are going rogue, and we are a completely divided country right now, which is not okay for so many different reasons. And you may have your opinions on whether it's okay to kneel or BLM or whatever. And all of those opinions should be respected, right? We may not agree or disagree, but that being said, whatever it is that you post, chances are you're going to piss off half the people out there that are your clients. So it's really important to be cognizant of what you're posting and what it might mean to potential buyers, to potential clients.
Right now, in my area, okay, there's a big controversy going down right now. There's a guy that is in a political position that posted some stuff online. There's not good stuff to post online, and right now there's big hoopla going on how to discipline that particular person. I'm not mentioning any names, I'm not mentioning any particular departments, but right to your point, Robert, that stuff that's happening right now. So that's very relevant, right on point. We've got a couple more comments coming in here. Greg Dudley says guest network hacking. Can they hack the guest network to get into the main network, to access the DMS and its data?
That's a good question. So, I spent some time on my dealership, oil changes and services and so forth. And I jump right onto their Wi-Fi. And by the way, when I do jump onto their Wi-Fi, I am deploying on my own device what's called a VPN. A VPN is a software program that I download and install on my laptop. VPN is short for Virtual Private Network. And a Virtual Private Network software program allows me to surf the internet on that free dealership Wi-Fi connection, and my information is encrypted on their Wi-Fi. So basically, my IP address is masked, my data is encrypted, and I can cruise on the dealership's Wi-Fi, and my information is secure, while all the other people in the waiting room can't see my data, and the dealership can't see my data either. So whenever you're out and about, you're at a hotel, you're at a resort, you're on free Wi-Fi at wherever, make sure you download and deploy a virtual private network. Just search VPN. There's a bunch out there. Now, as far as the guest Wi-Fi, so IT people within your organization should have basic systems in place to prevent the guests from jumping from the guest free Wi-Fi onto the company's Wi-Fi. Usually between hardware and software, there's basically firewalls in place that would prevent getting from the free Wi-Fi to the corporate Wi-Fi. Usually they need a username and a passcode in order to get on. And in some cases, even certain devices have permission and other devices won't have permission. So depending on the relative sensitive nature of that network will depend on what hardware and what software is deployed within that network where there is guest Wi-Fi. All that being said, if you just have open free Wi-Fi for everybody and both the employees and the guests are on that Wi-Fi, you're screwed. And I think that you know that. Overall, the router that comes from your ISP has a basic level of protection. For example, if you're provided like a Comcast or Xfinity Wi-Fi and they provide a free guest Wi-Fi with it, there is generally enough security in there to protect the dealership from getting hacked. That being said, as a dealership, I would not just rely on that. There are additional levels of hardware and software out there that would be put in line, that would be put in place to beef up and add additional layers of protection.
Okay, you guys ready for this? I'm going to announce a hack right here, right now, live on LinkedIn. If you want to find out what the passwords are at a dealership, come closer. I'm going to tell you right now. All you need to do is go up to the sales tower or to the sales manager's office when somebody's not there, because oftentimes there's somebody not there. Just take a quick walk around and go to the computer monitor. And what you'll find on that computer monitor is a bunch of sticky notes or taped pieces of paper that have the username and the password that you need to get into many of the secret accounts. So
yeah,
you heard it here, but don't tell them you heard it from me.
Yeah, Paul, the little yellow stickies with passcodes on them for internet access, for account access. So another thing that a dealership might want to do, in addition to bringing on an MSSP, a managed security service provider, is bringing on potentially a VCISO, which is a virtual chief information security officer, and between the two of them, between the two of those vendors, generally they would employ what's called a penetration tester. A penetration tester generally is a human that uses hardware, software, and social engineering, human hacking, to essentially find and determine the vulnerabilities of that organization. And one of those vulnerabilities might be that the hacker, the penetration tester, in this case an ethical hacker, shows up with a vehicle for repair and hangs out in the lobby, and during lunch walks into whatever room and sees what information he or she could find, and or plugs a thumb drive into the back of any of the desktops, and that thumb drive has a virus on it that allows him remote access.
Yeah.
That penetration tester's job is to compromise the network in so many different ways to determine what your vulnerabilities are. So going forward, he provides you a report and says, okay, so during lunch, the ethical hacker observed, the penetration tester observed that there was nobody in this particular office, went in, plugged this thumb drive in. So going forward, you want to make sure that every single time you leave that room, you lock it so that nobody can walk in and so forth. They determine what those vulnerabilities are, both in your physical and virtual environment.
Some of the larger dealer groups that I go into, that all of their offices, the doors are locked, and you have to enter a passcode. Of course, if you're standing there watching the person enter the passcode, then that might not be as good either. We've got a few comments here. Phil Pinto says, "In God we trust, everyone else we verify." Couldn't have put it any better myself. Ron Usher said, "Paul, my new password is," and he listed up with the smiley face emoji. Paulette responds to Ron with the sideways laughing face emojis and a wow. Ron Usher replies with the thumbs up, and Paulette replies with the face palm.
Yeah, face palm.
Now, so we talked about different forms of hacking. There's so much to cover, and we just don't have enough time to cover all of it. But there's one piece I do want to throw in there, which ransomware, right? It's one thing to get in and sneak things and create things, behind the scenes and accounts that nobody knows about. But ransomware is the bully that shows up with the big cayunes and says to you, they go right in front of you, they put the padlock on your system, and they tell you you're going to send me this much in Bitcoin to this untraceable account that's routed through 30 different servers throughout the world, and there's nothing you can do about it. Organizations, schools, large companies have been hit with ransomware, and the federal agents have basically told them there is nothing we can do. If you want your data, you got to pay the money, and that money is gone and gone for good. Can you touch a little bit on that? I know we're going to go over, but that's okay.
Ransomware should never happen. And the reason why it does is because organizations, government agencies, corporations, individuals, small businesses do not make the necessary investments in their technology to keep it updated, to keep it upgraded, to keep it secure. So if you're running Windows 10 throughout your network and your critical security patches are automatically updated, and you have various hardware and software for additional layers of firewalls, then you should not have ransomware. If all of your software, Adobe, Acrobat, and so forth, all of your various software programs are properly updated to the latest version as they roll them out, you should not have ransomware potential vulnerabilities. The reason why people get ransomware is generally outdated hardware, outdated software. And in that outdated hardware and outdated software, there are vulnerabilities. There are ports. There are configuration issues in that hardware or software that allow the bad guy to install that technology, which is the ransomware, and via phishing emails. So usually, I think like 90-something% of ransomware is often installed via a phishing email. But even still, if you get that phishing email and you do click that link and you launch that executable on your machine, if the hardware is properly updated, the software is properly updated, then it is much less likely that that ransomware will ever even have the potential of being installed, because the firewall is up, because the antivirus is updated, because the operating system is updated, and so on. So as long as IT is doing their job, as long as there is ongoing security awareness training, ransomware shouldn't happen. That being said, we see too often that that's just not the case, which is why ransomware is so successful.
So here's the thing. So I've gone into lots of dealerships where there's software that they use in parts of their business that can't work on the latest operating system. As crazy as that may sound, it runs, they've got a machine that's tied into the network that runs on a later software, a later operating software, or in order to utilize those programs that they're using. Which
like Windows XP, right? Or even Windows 7 at this point, right?
Yeah.
And so Windows XP has been dead-ended for over a decade. Windows XP has been dead-ended since the beginning of 2020. So if you have a single device within your operation that functions on Windows 7, you are vulnerable, and everything connected to that Windows 7 device is vulnerable. So, but all you have to do is make the necessary investments in hardware and software and upgrade your technology to make sure that that doesn't happen. Otherwise, you are a literal sitting duck. It is just a matter of time until you are picked off.
Because I'm sure they have sniffer programs that they launch at particular companies to look for just that.
So that not only do they have sniffer programs, they're constantly bombarding us with emails and to get us to open them and click them. And once we do, you're on a Windows 7 machine, you launch that executable, and it's game over. It's as simple as that.
We got Greg says customer brings in pictures of trade in on a thumb drive. Yeah, just what you were talking about.
Yeah, so that thumb drive could be infected. That thumb drive could be infected with the virus. So that could be problematic as well. So an old machine, an older operating system, plugging that thumb drive in, that could be an issue. You may want to have a dummy machine that you plug that thumb drive into. Say an older laptop that's not connected to anything. It is used for that one purpose. They call that a sandbox machine. It's a machine you play in. That it's not connected to the internet. It's not connected to, I mean, it might be connected to the guest Wi-Fi, which is fine, but it's not connected to any sensitive systems at all. It's a rogue machine that's its only purpose is to plug a thumb drive in so that you can see pictures, and that is it.
Awesome. Well, Robert, we are beyond the time, and we only covered a fraction of what I wanted to cover.
Sorry, Paul.
But I'm sure there are lots of questions that people have. So if you would be so kind, if you put a link to your website in the comments section here, so that people can, and I'll put that, I'll also add that to the post itself when I go to edit it, because when I create the stream, it doesn't give me the ability to tag, but I can go in, and so I usually edit it after the show. So I'll copy that link and I'll put that in the title of tonight's show. So I want to thank everybody that's been on tonight. If you see value in this, please share this with your network. This is crucial information for us personally, for our dealerships, and for any business that's out there. And let's face it, if we're on LinkedIn, we're all in some kind of business, and this is something that would help everybody. And if you have any questions, by all means, reach out to Robert. He's known our family since 1999. So we're going to do a security, not like it was 1999. We're going to do security today, and Robert will be able to answer all of your questions. And put your phone number in there as well, so they can reach you. Yeah,
Look, Paul, I'll send that to you offline. I'm having problems with my desktop, but yes, I will, I promise.
And then I'll update the show.
Yeah,
Robert?
So contact me at protectnowllc.com. So again, protectnowllc.com.
Awesome. Thank you all. And Robert, don't go away until after we log off here. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on Sunday Night Live.
Let's bring security analyst Robert Siciliano of Hotspot Shield.
Robert Siciliano is joining me now from Atlanta.
Robert Siciliano, identity theft expert.
McAfee Online security expert Robert Siciliano joins us now.
Cybersecurity expert Robert Siciliano.
All right, I'm counting.